Welcome back, Principal Matters podcast listeners. I am Dr. Jen Schwanke, and I'm here with my co host, William D. Parker. And we have a dynamic duo for you today on episode 483 of the Principal Matters podcast. We'll be joined by Maureen Chapman and James Simons. These two are the co founders of Core Creative Partners and co authors of the Solution Tree book, Leaders of the Class. So excited for you to get to meet these two. And hi, Will, we've got a question today.
Yeah. Hi, Jen. It's so great to see you. And I am so excited about this question. You brought the question this week, and it gave me permission to pull out some notes because your question was, why do you think reading non-education books is so important? And it's funny because in our last Monday Matters, we talked about both of us were reading some wellness books. One was more of a memoir, it sounded like, and the other one is nonfiction or, scientific. But I set some really big goals for myself last year to read not just non-education books, but also to read fiction, and to read some biography. And so I'm going to throw the question back to you first before I go crazy because I have so many things I want to talk about with this. But
Right.
why do you think it's so important for us not to just read education books, but non-education books too?
Right. Well, I have my phone here because I have I log all my books, right? And so I have read so many books. I think I'm up to 98 for this year, and I rarely actually read education books. When I do, it feels like work. And
Mhm.
that's important, right? It is work, and it's important to stay up to date on a lot of new thinking, but I have got to have the balance. Um, if people looked at my reading list as I am doing right now, they would think, who is this girl? Because I have a lot. Nonfiction is my jam, and that is not to mean research based stuff. I love biography. I love memoir. I love books that weave together something of a story with something to teach us. One of the most profound books I read this year was called Paper Girl.
Mm.
And this is a book about actually a town in Ohio that is really struggling. And, the men are struggling, the women are holding it together. And guess what's at the root of it? Education. If we don't invest in our schools, our communities fall apart. So that's just one example, but I also have lots of other things in here too that we could talk about for days. So I think I've answered the question and given an example of how even reading non-education books sometimes teach me a lot about my job.
Yeah, I there's no way in our 5-minute Q&A that we'll cover all
Uh-uh.
the things we've read this year, but one of the reasons I read a lot of fiction this year is my wife suggested, "Why don't we go through Pulitzer Prize winning books and pick some of those titles we've never read?" And so that gave me the chance to read some works like The Covenant of Water by Abraham Verghese, The Night Watchman by Jane Ann Phillips, um, The Most Famous Man in America by Debbie Applegate. So those were some really amazing um, stories. Some of them fiction, although the one by Debbie Applegate was actually a biography. But then at the end of the year, Jen, I discovered I've had people tell me before to read Wendell Berry, who's a
Mhm.
Kentucky fiction writer, and I finally did. Jayber Crow was one of those books I read. I've read a couple of others, but I fell in love with his style, and it just transported me back into parts of rural America that I grew up in, but also the stories of my grandfather and my father because they lived through some of those same time periods that he places his characters. So just like you, for me, the visiting of other people's stories, it gives me perspective. It helps me to see history in a way that through someone else's eyes that I may have not seen it otherwise. It helps me visit other cultures that I didn't know very much about, sometimes other places in the world. It helps me see time periods in slow motion versus just fast summaries of a specific time period. For instance, in The Most Famous Man in America, which is the story of Henry um, Stowe, who's Harriet Beecher Stowe's brother. Um, he and I may be misquoting the brothers and sisters' names, but he is was a a famous abolitionist preacher during that time, and I knew nothing about him and didn't realize at the time that he was one of the most prolific writers and speakers of that time period. Um, so yeah, it gives, I think, reading non-education books has been a powerful commitment for me, and I know it has been for you too, Jen. Man, we could do a whole
Mhm.
like episode just on this.
I was gonna say this. I think we've opened up a can of worms here. I'm gonna need to think more about this and think about how we can maybe bring our reading lives closer to our
Well, I will
listeners.
say
So
this as we wrap up our Q&A. I had one listener last year who wrote me and said, "Have you thought about starting a book club for Principal Matters readers?" And I have not committed to that. But if just as I'm saying it, I'm like, well, I don't know if you get out there and you're like, hey, if you
right,
and Jen wanted to do some, we all read the same books together, let me know. And I'm
right.
always open to suggestions, Jen.
Will's up for anything. Just let him know.
Yeah.
Reach out to us.
Well, Jen, how can listeners stay connected with you as they listen to this week's interview and think about your content?
Yes, absolutely. Reach out at jenschwanke.com anytime. You can drop me an email or subscribe to my newsletter.
And you can find this episode along with all of our resources and show notes at williamdparker.com. Thank you, Jen. And I'm looking forward to your wonderful interview with Maureen and James.
Thank you.
Let's take a moment to thank our sponsors, and then we'll be right back. Why is IXL used in 95 of the top 100 U.S. school districts? Because it works. Research across 45 states shows that IXL schools outperform other schools on state tests. With IXL, you get a personalized online learning and teaching solution that helps you improve achievement, empower teachers, track progress, and more. This one platform for K-12 helps teachers accomplish what normally would require dozens of other tools. For example, as students practice skills, IXL automatically adapts to ensure each learner is always supported and challenged at the right level. IXL also provides every student with a personalized learning plan to help them close knowledge gaps effectively. One of my favorite things about IXL is their personalized test prep tool. For exams like the SAT and ACT, IXL will analyze a student's most recent score and generate a custom list of skills to help them boost their scores. If you want to take the load off your teachers so they can do their best work, IXL can help. Learn more at ixl.com/PM.
You're listening to Principal Matters, the School Leaders Podcast.
Welcome, Principal Podcast listeners. We have a dynamic duo on today and can't wait for our listeners to get to know James Simons and Maureen Chapman. So I'm going to start with reading their bios so our listeners can hear who they are, and then they will introduce themselves, which will be fun. So Maureen and James are the co-founders of Core Creative Partners, which is a Boston-based company that provides inspiring and practical professional development for educators by educators. Key point there. They are the co-authors of the Solution Tree book, Leaders of the Class, Teaching Motivation, Perseverance, Communication, and Collaboration in the Secondary Classroom. And at the time of this recording, the book is brand new, so brand new. And by the time our listeners hear it, it will be out in the world a couple months, but exciting times. We'll talk about that in a minute. Both Maureen and James have written articles for Edutopia, Inside Higher Ed, and Middle Web. A little more about Maureen. In addition to her co-founder work, she supports leadership development and student engagement through speaking, coaching, workshops, PLCs. She's a lifelong educator who's taught for 15 years in elementary, middle, and high school classrooms and spent 8 years in school leadership. As a curriculum director and the head of an instructional leadership team, she oversaw curriculum, resources, student data, instructional coaching, PD, new teacher induction, and career education. And I read it that way because I know curriculum directors do a lot of things outside of curriculum. And then James supports leadership development and student engagement through consulting coaching, facilitating workshops and PLCs, delivering speeches, producing videos, and writing for other outlets. James served as a high school principal and dean of students, an instructional coach, a middle and high school English teacher, a video-based storyteller, and a writer. And so what we have here are two dynamos who I believe you both really want to say that you love school. So tell us more. Now that I've introduced you with the words that I found on the internet, tell us who you are. And James, why don't you start us off?
Okay, thanks so much, Jen. What a lovely introduction, and we're so grateful to be here talking with you. We are longtime educators and even longer time students. And we just love being in school. We love the relationships that you build when you are paired with others with a meaningful shared focus. And we love the work itself. And certainly our relationship is a testament to that. We started together on the same middle school grade level team as classroom teachers. And one day we just kind of woke up and we were in leadership roles and we were just like, oh, what happened?
What
And,
happened?
I think we had each envisioned careers as educators growing up. We each were babysitting and camp counseling and running around telling the other kids in class what the answer was. So we'd, in probably sometimes obnoxious ways, embrace the identity of the educator. But I don't think either of us really saw ourselves as leaders until we wound up in a formal leadership position.
Mm-hmm.
And that's when our bond really strengthened because together we were just trying to make sense of this really complex set of responsibilities that we each suddenly had in front of us. And so it was only when we formally became leaders that we started to more deliberately build the emotional, the social, and the technical skills required for leadership. And I think at a certain point, we had this realization that, boy, there's been a lot of privilege that has put us in a position
Mm-hmm.
to be tapped on the shoulder to
Right.
serve formally as a leader. And even still, we're lacking the confidence, we're lacking some of the skills. So, what does that mean for others? What does that mean for those who haven't always loved school, for those who have not always experienced that sense of belonging, that sense of possibility, that sense of confidence? And so, I think that is what brought us to really thinking about leveraging our roles as educators in order to teach about how to be a leader. And we quickly realized as we were one, supporting educator leaders with
Mm-hmm.
the social and emotional competencies that they needed for their roles. And then two, supporting classroom teachers to integrate SEL in the academic setting. We realized, oh, we are doing the exact same thing. In both of these cases,
Mm-hmm.
we are focusing on connecting with our motivation, persevering in the face of challenge to achieve motivating goals, communicating with others, building relationships so that we can collaborate. And so we wrote this book in an effort to show just how much the adults in the building and the kids in the building are doing very parallel work in
Right.
building the skills and the identities of leadership.
Right. Right. I have a couple things to say, and then Maureen, I want to hear from you too. First of all, we do not, and I say we collectively across the globe probably, we do not talk enough about loving school. And that is not to say everybody needs to love it. That's is to say that schools are amazing places. They really are. And so many wonderful things happen, and we spend so much time criticizing, finding the things to be mad about rather than the things to celebrate. And then the second thing I was going to say is I too started in middle school, and my friends on my middle school team remain my friends today. There's something really powerful
Oh,
about teaching together in middle school. So true. Maureen, what were you going to add?
It's funny, just hearing your both of you talk, it brought me back to a memory I hadn't thought about in a while, which is my very first day as a school leader. I showed up my July 1 start date, I'm starting early, and the school leader puts two piles of paper on my desk and he says, I think there's really just two main priorities. One would be the schedule, and there's a pile of student registrations for courses, but there's no schedule. So if I could just put a schedule together and assign students. And then the other one would be the internship program, and he puts a pile of student signups and applications for an internship program that doesn't exist. So I could just quickly put that together and make these placements for all these students. And I was like,
Just go ahead and build some big systems, please. No biggie.
these two quick things for July 1. And I was like, okay. And I think it's a good reminder that it's through those academic or technical, I think it was partially you saying the word technical, James, like tasks that you're given that you have to call upon some other skills to in order to do them. And I think that for us, it's through the hard work that we can find that data about ourselves to examine, to understand ourselves better. What is motivating us as we do these difficult tasks? What are we calling upon to persevere through these difficult tasks? You know, I wouldn't need a separate lesson about how to persevere. I just need to think about how I am persevering in this hard task. Um, what is my communication if I'm struggling here, if I'm feeling overwhelmed? What is the way that I'm bringing others in to collaborate? And so I think that's a really important element of this book. It's situated in a secondary context, which is where we taught. And it's so appropriate in elementary school to circle up and talk about being a good friend and talk about what we do when we're having a hard time. In secondary school, I think it's also appropriate, of course, to circle up and have advisory and have these conversations, but it's really important to shift our understanding of our emotional way of being and our social way of being in the context of our work. And so that's how James and I came to really build this relationship as well, as through this meaningful work. And as leaders, you are now swarming in everyone's emotions and your own emotions, which you're also holding this positional power, and you're used to that as a teacher, but it's different with other adults. And so if we could go backwards and teach the skills we expect and help people make the most out of the rich academic experiences they're given, then we can really mine the educational experiences as really valuable for our own self-work and our own ability to be ready to believe in ourselves as leaders for being who we are and know who that is and what that means. So that's a little bit about too, just the nature of this book is being situated in the context of the academics.
Right. So one thing that has me so drawn to this book and this conversation is if one more person in a PD says, "Okay, remember your why," I might explode because I find that conversation or that line of thinking very condescending and a conversation stopper. What I do love is this use of the word motivation. It's the same thing. I recognize that, but it's also not for the person who's doing this digging in, right? And so when you talk about motivation and what is it that motivates us, I think that's a lot easier to wrap your mind around because it's more proactive than reactive, right? It's the motivation comes before the reflection. So I'm going to ask a couple of questions about the book that you've touched on, you've grazed through, but see where you go with this. First of all, why is it critical for school leaders to shift the focus from leadership as a position rather than instead move toward the skill set part of it? And secondly, can one of you walk us through the practical framework that this book provides? And what does it actually look like on a Tuesday morning? They're both laughing. For our listeners, both of my guests right now are laughing, and I don't know what that means. So let's turn the volume up and see what they have to say.
So I think we're each pausing to be polite and let the other person go. You know, when we reflect on how we work together, we know that we both always have too many things to say. And so like we're kind of like too much plus too much equals just enough.
Hopefully.
So, you know,
I have that struggle too. It's okay.
I think that's each of us pausing to, you know, make sure we're not dominating the microphone. So having said that, why don't I bring my own too muchness? So as I was saying earlier, Maureen and I had the benefit of landing a formal position and then having the time and the practice to see the skills and the identity follow. And knowing that not everyone will have that same opportunity, it's important to start with building the skill set and building a sense of identity, because the stronger that those two components are, the more likely that those opportunities will present themselves to you, or the more likely that you will kick down the door that the opportunity is hiding behind and saying, don't you dare forget me. If you're not tapping me on my shoulder, I'm going to tap you on your shoulder. And that isn't to minimize all the systemic barriers, that lead some people to be more likely to be tapped than others.
Right.
We can control how we see ourselves. We can't always control how others see us. We can control how we operate within a system, knowing that over time impacts the system in different ways, but we can't fully control the system that we're in. So of course, there are all kinds of other much bigger factors that explain why someone may have come and tapped me on the shoulder to become a dean of students, but didn't do the same for others. But if you push that aside and just say, what do we know we can control? It's a long list, of course. And for us, the area of control that excites us is where the rubber meets the road in the classroom, the meaningful teaching and learning that is happening with caring educators and with the really wonderful kids that they're there to support. So we strongly believe, if as soon as we get a kid in the classroom, we are focusing on empowering that student to build the skills and the identity of a leader, that student is going to leave the classroom feeling empowered to pursue those opportunities or make those opportunities to inhabit formal leadership roles as well. So that is a response to the first question you posed. And then I also heard you asking about, actually, what does the framework in the book look like? So now I will go back into my polite mode and stop talking, and Maureen would be glad to respond.
When I throw two questions to two guests, I think maybe the second guest does have responsibility for the second question.
The privilege. Yeah. And I think, you say the eye roll at what's your why. And I think that's a little bit out of context. And again, if we take these things and put them back into context, we know motivation is discipline specific. You have a student who identifies as a mathematician and not a writer, and vice versa. I'm not creative. There's certain statements that people will make they feel totally comfortable making. And we know also secondary schools, this time of leadership is of identity development. How many central questions of who am I, or do you find in a middle school or a high school, which is super appropriate question for kids to keep exploring, but in different contexts. Do I see myself as a leader here? And I find sometimes, and you'd hear this with your listening ears in interviewing when you're hiring, people who might say, as long as I find some kids who love this, or as long as every kid finds one place they feel successful. And I think that's selling kids short. We're trying to hold them to the identity of a leader in every class. We're putting them in these classes for a reason, that we believe in them. And the more that we can, this is one of the four conditions that need to be present for leadership that we lay out in the book. You need to have this belief in self and others. And we can be really afraid that we don't have what it takes as the teacher to get that student, every single student, to be successful here. And then we can let ourselves off the hook or let them off the hook in different ways that are not honoring them as leaders in science or leaders in math or leaders in English class, etc. So we want to just keep bringing it. Of course, there's this bigger what's my why, but why am I doing this assignment right now? Why am I doing this class? Do I see myself as a leader? Do I see all my peers as leaders? Do I think my teacher thinks I'm a leader? And so these are some of the questions that come up in the launch part of the framework. To get into that second part of your question, the units of this book are meant to pair with the units of your academic course and go through the year. So this is not meant to be done out of the context of class. This is meant to go with and naturally connect to the class. And I think when we sometimes this work will be framed as social emotional learning, if those words are allowed where you are teaching. And so this idea of just starting with what's my identity? How do I see myself and my peers as leaders to start the year? And begin to build this leader profile. So it's a shift from this learner profile to a leader profile where students through the year are continually coming back to how they see themselves as a leader in that particular class. If you're doing this on a team, like the super strong middle school teams we see in so many places, it gives you a little direction on how to make sure you're not being redundant for students being asked the same thing over and over, and how you can come together and team around it. But it kind of provides the step-by-step. It gives you some for each unit of how you're going to prepare to think about, okay, I'm going to start a unit on communication. What are my own experiences seeing myself as leader in communication? Okay, what are the opportunities in the unit ahead for students to be engaging in discussion or presentations or exchanging feedback? All right, I'm going to mark these points of my unit plan that I had anyway, and we're going to offer these reflection tools as they go along. But there's a bit of just a launch of the unit, so there's some talking points for framing with students, some chance for them to internalize how does a leader communicate to stay on that unit example. And then there will be usually, as they unpack that question, a model of a technique that can be used. So like for the communicate, there's a spider web discussion that is designed to balance student voice and to show, I really do want to hear from each and every one of you. That's all of our goal. So each unit kind of provides a bit of a launch to kind of say, all right, this is the learning objective here that is going to naturally build through the year. And then we're going to just have these ongoing reflections with my goal to communicate as a leader. How did I do today? What's my next goal? What did I try? So in motivation, we're really understanding the emotions that are coming up. And there's a lot of work to just build literacy around emotion words, like how did I feel? How am I sharing that? And I'm not asking the student to share it with other students, but just to really become more self-aware. How am I seeing myself as motivated in this class? We really think that unit is important to make visible things that the teacher may not see or invite to hear about, because it's more internally focused for the student. But to just kind of open the line of communication, we talk about making thinking visible, but can we make the feelings visible as
Right.
well? And then go ahead.
No, I'm my mind is spinning right now because I'm thinking about how motivation can be the bridge between the internal emotions and reactions to the external product. And another distinction I'm making is as teachers say, and I want to leave space for honesty here. So a teacher's why might be, I don't know, I got to pay the mortgage. But the motivation might be because I have this spider web framework that is going to allow me to launch this in a way that will make my students be excited about it, get some content out of it, be able to be excited about a potential next class they might take, the project that we're going to come out of it. So, and so similarly, the students might be like, well, my why is because I gotta. Because if I don't, I'm gonna get an F and my mom's gonna be mad at me. And then we're gonna, that could be the why. But the motivation is well, this might be interesting. And I really like the kid I'm working with. So maybe we can create something powerful. And so it's two bridges. It's internal to external, and it's why to motivation.
Yeah, and I think the emotions are there's just I think it's been really an interesting opportunity for me in the research and learning just how important emotions are. I mean, you kind of know that, and then the more you read about it, it's like, whoa, I mean, this is what makes us human. And
Right.
you feel before you speak, and you feel after you speak at the end of your life. The feelings are with you forever, and they're really telling you what to do and what not to do, and
Right.
they're dependent on if you feel like you're going to be successful too. And that's something that we know as teachers is just if the kid feels like they can do it, and
Right.
that's there as well. And so that bridge to the persevere chapter. So what are some experiments and some small bets we can try to keep working when we're feeling these unpleasant emotions, which are human and normal and valid, and but they're not the end point. Now we're gonna, so I'm feeling like I can't do it. So what am I gonna try? And how am I gonna keep putting myself in the position to say, so I'm gonna try this then, and I'm gonna try that, and I'm gonna share with the teacher what I'm trying, and we're going to co-construct the things we try, because of course as the teacher you know in some ways what works, but you also know you can't tell a kid what works. They've got to
Right.
at least believe they said, and often they
Right.
can add strategies that you might not have thought of. So it's just this culture of, collaboration, that like, this is important, so we're going to keep at it,
Right.
and I'm going to have ideas, you're going to have ideas, we'll see how it goes. And that's what leadership is always about, is little small bets, but we're going to just keep at it.
Right. So speaking of bridges, make a bridge for me between you're working together as middle school teachers and now you've co-founded Core Creative Partners together. So tell me about that jump and then talk about how your partnership works in practice and how your individual strengths do complement each other when you're coaching, leading, writing. Tell me about that. A lot of people, myself included, do well working alone. And you two are not doing that. So talk to us about that.
So I would say that the jump from school leadership to leading this small consultancy uh, was really a response to the suffering that we're observing during the pandemic. For the
Okay.
first 2 years of the pandemic, we were in leadership roles, and every day there were people in our offices crying,
Right.
and they were family members, they were students, they were teachers.
Right.
And we were looking around and saying, this is supposed to be a place of connection, of joy, of love for each other, and of the meaningful work that we are doing together. But
Right.
so many of us have lost touch with that love. And so within this broader context of crisis, we also were observing how much fun we were having working together, just looking at problems and creatively, collaboratively experimenting with strategies that moved us towards solutions. And we just thought, what if we could take what we're learning from one setting and bring it to another setting and share and absorb new learning, and then bring that new learning to a third setting? And in what way could we, in different roles, really help individuals and organizations increase their capacity so that there is space again in their heads and in their hearts to reconnect with that love of school? And so that was the why. And that why didn't feel condescending, as you said, Jen, which is so true. It can. And the reason is because we weren't told that why. We
That's
discovered it.
exactly right. That's right. And
And
and yes, and nobody asked you in a way that was trying to catch you with nefarious intent. Well, why? Right? So right. So then the why becomes a positive. Right. Exactly.
Yeah.
so, now that we are in this work, that first part of the story really aligns with the first full unit of our framework, the Motivate unit. We really reflected on what we were observing, and we set a goal to spread this love. The second unit, Persevere, is when things start getting hard, how do we experiment with strategies? And the third one, in Communicate, is as we are experimenting with strategies to achieve shared goals, how can we exchange feedback in a positive, productive way so we're not getting in each other's way or in our own way? And so I would say that we have just been trying to really live out this framework in our day-to-day professional relationship. And we communicate a lot
Mhm.
about what is working, about what isn't working. We work to foster a sense of safety to ensure that when we give each other feedback,
Mhm.
it can really be received and no one is getting defensive. I
Mhm.
think it is really clear to the two of us that we are on the same team.
Right. Right.
And that is a broader philosophy that we hold, which is, guess what? We're all on the same
Right.
team. And
Right.
you can go into a staff room and a teacher will be saying, this parent or this administrator, and you can go into the boys' bathroom and a kid's going, this teacher, this principal, we all have stories about who's on the other team,
Right.
but those are stories and they're not true. At the end of the day, we are all on one team. And if we believe that and work together and communicate effectively so that that work is productive, we are
Right.
all going to win. It's not a zero-sum game. So
Right.
for the two of us, we really prioritize fostering that safety anchored in a belief that we're all
Right.
working on the same team. And then one other thing I'll say is related to belief. We really believe in each other. I
Mhm.
think early on in our collaboration, we each went, oh, this person is really impressive. This person is really capable. And when we decided to take this scary jump,
Very scary.
and
Yes.
what made it less scary for me was I'm like standing on the edge of a cliff and my legs are jello. And then I look over and Maureen's like, you got this.
Right. Right.
And I thought, you know what? If this person who's so impressive and so capable thinks that I'm impressive and capable, like,
Yeah.
maybe I do have this. And so
Right.
I think like each of our belief in the other has reinforced our belief in ourself and it's made it that much easier to persevere when things have gotten scary or in any way challenging.
Every really outstanding team I've been on, I have been able to say, um, I'm pretty inoffendable. I really am. But here's now, as you're talking, I'm realizing I didn't mean that overall. I can easily be offended, but I'm not offended when the person giving me the feedback or telling me the hard feedback, whatever, I know they're on my side.
Yeah.
Then I'm like, "Oh, you can't offend me because I know the intent here is that we get better." So, I have many times said, "Hey, don't worry, I'm inoffendable," but I only say it to people I trust. Now that you're talking, I'm realizing that
Yeah.
I have never said I'm inoffendable to somebody to whom I might be very offended if they say something, right? So that's a key point. And another thing, and Maureen, I'd love to know your thoughts about this. I have a colleague just yesterday, she came to me and she said that when she was leading her team, she would always say, "We can do hard things," which is a very often used phrase and probably attributed to Glennon Doyle, maybe not, but she said, "I realized I was wrong because, sure, we can do hard things, but many times we don't want to do hard things, which kind of messes with the motivation to do hard things, and then we might not do the hard things." So she gave everyone on her team kind of her revised one, which is, "Don't let the hard days win." Um,
Mm.
and I think that's a really interesting, and honestly quite effective way to lead a team. We can do hard things, again, can feel condescending because someone who's doing the hard thing is like, "Yeah, but, this is awful." And school leaders, many times, teachers all the time, can have some really, really hard days, and we don't wanna let them win. So, Maureen, I'd love for you to kind of take what James and I threw out there and tell us what you think about that in the context of the work you do with core creative partners.
Yeah, I mean, I think that the promise of collaboration is that you're better together, right? You can do things with other people you couldn't have done on your own. I never would have thought, I always thought I would be a teacher. I
Right.
never thought I would be a school leader. I surely never thought I would be quitting my job and starting a company. That was nowhere on my, it's pretty much as far as I go. So I will teach and I want to be a mom. I knew I wanted to do those two things. I've done those two
Right.
things. And yeah, it was this belief like, okay, well, if James thinks that we can do this, I guess we can, and also like it was honestly like being managed up a little bit too by someone I supervised when I was a school leader. If I would be hedging on like, well, I don't know if that would be okay. And she's like, you decide, Maureen. Like this idea that
Right.
like I have to own my power as well, that like I can do more than I would have maybe without someone else asking me. I can ask of myself to serve more with the skills I've built and that we can do that together. But we also like that one of the other conditions in the book is safety to take risk. And so that like sometimes I'll think it has to be super silly safe to be able to hear something that is
Right.
hard. And yeah, it's not shameful to feel bad. We will
Right.
feel bad. And the feedback, James can say something and I'm super safe. I still might not feel good, but that's
Right.
okay. You know,
Right.
that's what I need to hear. And I need to trust that I can hear that. But I think that one of the other conditions is motivating work. And in this company, we really try to put each other in the way of joy. And so that means there are things that we both really love. We have a lot of overlap, but James has always loved writing and speaking. So like when we got the opportunity to write this book, we're sitting across the table and the email comes in and James' face just lights up. And I'm like, what is this? What's this email? And then I see it, and I'm like, oh no, it's terrible news. So much work. I didn't want to write a book. Like that wasn't my plan, but and it was so hard, but we did it together and we
Right.
both brought different things to it. And I did something I never thought I would do. He's always loved public speaking. So here I am doing keynotes. I didn't want to but I'm going to spend tomorrow in a dark room, but today I'm going to
Right.
do it because that's what we do here on this team. And that's part of what's really motivating. And I can believe in myself in new ways through seeing myself through his joys and motivations and hopefully vice versa. And so we're growing in all these different ways, which is really exciting and scary and feels good and feels bad. And we hope for students through using the framework, that last unit is collaboration, and it builds out roles for students to lead themselves. And as there's a role of the advocate. So kids in your team, like what could make this project connect to your goals even more? What could you ask for that would help this feel even more motivating? There is a role of the motivator. So like take it upon yourselves to take what I've given you as a teacher and make it even more aligned to what you all want to do. You tell us, or you tell me as a teacher what it should be, and you lead it, but you're going to find yourself in that way, doing things you never thought you would have done, seeing yourself in new ways, and you're going to be better because you did that together and giving you time to know each other enough and have this build of safety enough to work on something meaningful and push yourselves. And that's what adolescents want to do anyway. That's what their brains are developmentally geared to do, is look to each other. And so the more we can put them in the way of doing that, they're going to just find all sorts of things we never could have found, or if we did find them, they wouldn't have heard them from us
Right.
anyway.
Okay. You guys, I'm throwing out the next 5 questions. Listeners, I sent them some questions and we're not going to get to them. First, because we're running out of time, but second, because I now have more questions. So as you're talking, you guys, you are seamlessly moving between using the word leaders with the grown-ups in charge of the school, the grown-ups in charge of the classroom, and the kids in the classroom.
Mhm.
That's probably very deliberate, or it's not, you've just done it so much that it's muscle memory. So if I forced you to tell me who your audience is, I think you'd first try to say it's everyone in education. It's principals, it's the deans, it's the teachers, it's the students. But if I didn't let you say that, who's your main audience when you have this conversation about leading?
So I will first say that in terms of the coaching and the professional development facilitation that we do, we support different audiences. So this is kind of a cheat.
Oh, there he goes. There he goes.
Jen, I promise I will give you an actual answer.
Listeners, this is suspense. Hang on to
But
James's answer.
but but we support school and district leaders, and then separately we work closely with classroom teachers
Gotcha.
and those who are supporting classroom teachers to increase student engagement. And so the cheat answer is both.
Yes.
And within that cheat answer is the truth that is, it's genuinely the same work. It is building the motivation and then helping people develop the skills to do this very challenging collaborative work. And then having said that, if I zoom in on the book specifically, our goal with the book was to take all of our learning from working with adult leaders, coupled with a lot of research into the field of leadership development. So, okay, well, what can we learn from sports? What can we learn from business? What can we learn from the military? And then applying all of those adult contexts to the classroom where young people are building their skills and their abilities. So the target reader for this book is a secondary school classroom teacher or a coach or a principal or an AP, someone who is
Oh, you see what he
yet to
did
be.
there? You see what he did? For everybody.
Yeah, it is, but specifically whoever has a job that has them thinking about increasing student engagement and by extension student achievement. And so the most obvious answer would be a classroom teacher, but there also are instructional coaches or school leaders who are really thinking about how can I help this teacher
Right.
support student engagement.
Okay, so that's the right answer, and thank you for giving it to me, and thank you for letting me tease you and push you a little bit. Maureen, I'm going to have you wrap us up with this question. Um, and this ties exactly to what James just said. You both have this ultimate goal to make schools a place where everyone loves it. And clearly the students are your deepest motivation. So, how is that development in leadership for both the people paid to lead, the principal, the dean, the assistant principal, and the teachers who are paid to teach? How can we come together to create that culture where everyone, those two groups plus the students, love the school? What's that ingredient? What's that mixture of ingredients we want to put into this soup?
Yeah, and I think, we say in the book, this book is a love letter. We genuinely hope this is an offer and service, and it comes from, of course, our own experiences. But I think that the magic is always decentering yourself
Mhm.
and asking someone, honoring someone by asking them what's important here. And can you trust me to build your skills to do what's important to you? And um, do you have what it takes to do that, which takes incredible emotional composure and social skill and grace and a willingness to sit in fear of the unknown. We don't know exactly how that will go, and to believe that we can do that. And so a teacher in a classroom who comes in holding the reins too tight is never going to have it with their kids. And a school leader who comes in holding the reins too tight, saying it has to be like this, and not willing to ask a question with, uncertainty involved in the answer, is never going to have it with their faculty. And we have to be brave enough to ask someone to introduce uncertainty, to co-construct with people a vision, and of course, as a leader, also to be setting the complex set of guiding principles which come to us too from the state frameworks, et cetera, and the school mission, et cetera. And then we bring ourselves to it. And then we are also asking students, or as school leaders, asking teachers to bring yourself to it, and knowing that that creates a messiness, but that's the joy of school. It is a messy place. This isn't a predictable environment. And so the more that we feel like we have the skill to do that, it's when teachers do that with their students, that students know teachers mean it when they say they matter. It's when school leaders listen and change and respond and ask. We can believe that the leader cares what we think and bother to share it. So I think it's this idea of this co-constructed space, but anchored in this really important work, and the belief that this work has the power to change lives at a scale unlike in any other profession. You as a teacher are the leader, and the more you believe that and own that and hold that as a way of allowing students to do the same, that's going to create an environment in which we can all hopefully love school for the mess that it is.
Well, that's a beautiful answer. And what strikes me about the two of you is some, I'm not going to say many because I'll get hate mail. Some consultants, I believe their work has a selfish base. I want to create my own hours. I want to travel a little bit. I have things to say that people, by golly, need to listen to. And I really feel that yours is a selfless base. I really do, you guys. I feel like your intentions are not necessarily those that drive some people to go into, I'm air quoting, consulting, because that can mean anything. So I thank you for that. I thank you for these beautiful answers and the way you kept coming back to the kids. And it really was phenomenal to hear you weave your students to leaders and teachers as well. And I started this call. I'm going to wrap up with this. I started this call before we were recording. Um, saying that I was glad that you reached out. Um, sometimes I'm doing the reaching out to podcast guests, but when that happens, I sometimes miss the diamonds, and I really would have. So I thank you so much, Maureen and James, for reaching out, because this has been so fun and such a great tool for our listeners.
Thank
Thank
you,
you so
Jen.
much, and thank you for the really incredible energy and joy that you bring to the work that always comes through in your newsletter and your podcast and your posts. It's always authentic and fun. We're really grateful to be in conversation with you.
Thank you. Maybe
Yeah.
someday we'll be in a room together, you guys, and that would be fun. That would be fun. Yeah. Okay. Well, thank you so much for being here. Principal Matters podcast listeners, if you want to get a hold of James and Maureen, I'm going to actually let them tell you how to do that. So tell them how our listeners find you.
Absolutely. You can visit our website, which is CORE, C-O-R. Maureen, as a longtime Latin teacher, named us CORE is Latin for heart, corecreativepartners.com, or send either of us an email. It's our first name, Maureen or James, at corecreativepartners.com. And we love to talk with other educators, so please do reach out.
Perfect. And we will put that information in the show notes, listeners. You can also go to LinkedIn and scroll. You might have to scroll back a little bit, but you will find Maureen and James opening their box of books, which is always such a moment for an author. So thank you, everyone. And I appreciate you coming today, James and Maureen.
Thank you so much, Jen.
Thank you for listening to today's episode of Principal Matters, the School Leaders Podcast. If you enjoyed the show, would you take a moment and like, share, subscribe, or leave us a review? In fact, if you share it out with a friend, even more people can become a part of these conversations. Sign up for our newsletter at williamdparker.com for even more free resources. And don't forget to check out our website to learn more about our books, professional development offerings, Grow Academies, masterminds, executive coaching, and keynote presentations. Wow, let's keep learning together. And thank you for doing what matters.
Principal Matters.